Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be looking at building this, which is of course a leaf spring suspension setup. In order to get this made and rigged, we're going to be using a number of technologies within Cinema 4D, including some Expresso, dynamics, a dynamic connector, a pose morph tag, and a couple of target tags. It sounds as if it might be quite complex, but actually it's a relatively simple setup. It's just a workflow that you need to understand. That's what we're about in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll begin by creating an arc, and then I'm going to switch my view to my right hand view. Now, the radius for the arc I'm going to make 150, start angle to 60 and end angle to 80. And that will give us a nice starting point, and we can change our plane to, it should be ZY. So in our 3D view, we've got our arc facing along its x-axis. You can make it face along the Z, it doesn't really matter, but I've just chosen to go with the X. Go back into my right hand view, and then what we'll do is just zoom in a little bit closer, and then we can think about starting to copy the arc. So we need 3 copies, so I'll hold down my command key and drag, and now we've got our 3 copies. And we can start working with these. Now the radius needs to be 151 for the second, 152 and 153. Let's go and make that 152 and 153. And that gives us our 4 layers of our leaf spring underway. Now we've got to change our start and end angles on these. Let's see what we can change them to. So we'll start doing the end angles first, I think. So if we come in to say 275, I think that will be okay for that, and 265. And next one we can make to 64, or rather 267 I should say at the start angle, and to 73 at the end angle will be fine for that, I think. And arc 3, let's make this one, I think we can leave that probably there. 269 and 271 I think will work. Yeah, that's okay. Let's have a look. Let's have a quick zoom in and see if we think it's okay. It could go a little bigger, couldn't they? I think we could probably allow this to go 272 and 268, and then the others, let's have a look. If we go 266, 274 and 264 and 276. Now that I think is pretty good. I think that will work nicely. So that's great. That's our first step towards making this into a leaf spring. The next thing we need to do, we'll select all of our arcs, and I'm going to group them, call this original arcs, and then copy it, open it up, and we can remove these from here. And now we can make them editable. So I've copied my originals just in case we need to do any more work. So my original arcs are now copied, and what we can do is, and of course made editable, and what we can do is select points mode, and we can take a look at what's going on within these arcs. Now I don't want these points here and here, and I don't want these points here and here. I'll just make these disappear. So I just want each arc to have just 3 points. Now we've got a bit of a problem because this has straightened things out. Now what we're going to do is change the type from Bezier to a Kima, and you can see that that's created the curves back in them. And then we can simply select Bezier again, and now we still have those curves. So that's a useful thing to know. if you ever take away points from a Bezier spline and it loses its shape, but you want to retain that shape, all you need to do is change it to an Akima in the type and then go back to Bezier, and you'll find that it will be okay, because it resets the remaining tangents to the correct shape. So that's really good. It creates that correct shape by adjusting the length of the tangents. Fabulous. That's great. So we've got that. The next thing we can think about doing is joining all of these together and making one object. So we'll say connect objects and delete. And now we've got a single arc. Moving on from here, we can bring in a rectangle and we can adjust its shape, or rather its size, and just bring it down to a shape that's going to give us something that we can sweep along this now single arc. So let's have a look and see what we can do here. So in the width, we can bring this down, bring it down to probably around 5. And this can probably be just beneath 1. We can say 0.9, maybe 0.97 or something like that. 0.075, somewhere there. And then we can drop this under here and we'll think about sweeping this along our arc. So let's just get a sweep, hold down Option, bring in a sweep, the rectangle's in, and we can drop this in. Now let's go into our 3D view and just see what we've got. We probably haven't got it absolutely right at this moment in time because it will need some adjustment. No, so it's not quite in the right plane. So let's see what we get when we change planes. Right, we're still not getting what we want because we perhaps need to swap these figures round. So if we say 5 in the height and 0.95 or 0.975 in the width, let's see what we get when we do some adjustments. Not that way, but that way. Perfect. So in the XY plane, we've got what we want, and we can see that we're getting something that's starting to resemble a leaf spring. Now, with this rectangle, I'm also going to add rounding, but I'm going to go something like 0.2, and that's looking really quite nice. And then with the sweep here in the caps, I'm going to give it 0.2 in the bevel shape, and that creates a very, very nice looking result for us. I'm liking that very much. So we've got the first step towards creating our leaf spring. Now we can just switch the sweep off for a minute because we want to work with purely the spline. Now I'm going to go back into my side view, so my right hand view, zoom in, and we'll start working with some circles. So we'll bring a circle in, much too big at the moment. Let's make it radius about 2. We'll just, don't want all those views, just my right hand view. Just zoom out a tad and bring the circle down so that it's somewhere near the place that we're going to be putting it, and that's going to be over here. Now that looks quite a large circle, but it's not. It's going to be fine for what we're doing. So 2 centimeters radius is going to be good for this. And what we'll do is place that one there, and I will then command drag to create a second one and just bring that over there. Make both circles editable, and I'm also going to click on this checkbox here for closed spline because we don't want a closed spline. Now at the moment this circle is fine because it's going to line up and it will give us this curl around here, which is exactly what we want, but we need to do some work with this one. So our first circle, we need to come up to spline, point order, we'll say move down sequence, and that's fine. Now we've got things in the right place. Moving on from here, we just need to make some adjustments. So the circle's not quite in the right place, so let's just move it down a bit and in a bit. And this can be done by eye again. This is not particularly pedantic. You don't have to be at all particular about this because it will work fine when we sort things out in a minute. We just got to make it just about in the correct place. Same with this one. we'll just move this down to somewhere around here. Perhaps move it in a smidgen, just a little tiny bit. And then we've got both of our circles, and we can grab a hold of these, drop them under the arc, and again we can select all and connect objects and delete, so that we then have a single spline for absolutely everything. Go back into points mode, select these points, and in our spline we're going to say remove weld, and click on there, and now we've joined that together. We're going to do the same the other side. So select both of these points, spline, remove, weld, and we've done it. Just going to make a little bit of an adjustment to the rotation here. We can just bring this. What I'll do first, if let's have a look in my spline. If I were to go, I think, and say tangents, if I make that hard for a minute, let's just see if I can rotate that round to there, and then make that soft. Yeah, that works, and it's created what I wanted it to do. That's brought that out perfectly. So now that's looking really nice. We can do the same the other end. Just select the point there, go into hard interpolation for a minute, and then go back to soft after we've made the adjustment. So tangents, hard, just rotate that round to there, and tangents, soft, and that's great. And now we've got something that really does look as if it's resembling a leaf spring. I'm just going to make this slightly longer. Select my selection tool there. Just need to make this particular tangent a little bit longer, and just bring that down so that we get that curve back in there. Again, I'm doing this by eye. It's okay, it'll be fine. Just grab a hold of that one, just bring that down to there somewhere, and that will give us that nice curve. Okay, great. Yeah, that looks good. That looks very, very nice. And now we can bring back the sweep, go into our 3D view, and we can see that we are getting something that resembles a leaf spring. In the sweep here, or rather in the arc I should say, what we need to do, we've got a uniform arc, but we need to increase the number. We'll make that 60, and that gives us a nice smooth result. Yeah, and I'm liking that. That really does look like a leaf spring now. So that's how you go about creating the spring. That bit is done, and we can now think about how we're going to make this thing move and how we're going to animate it. That'll be our next step. With our arc selected, we can add a pose morph tag. So we'll come down to rigging, pose morph. Set it to points mode in the mixing here, and we're ready to go. So we've got our base pose, which is what we've got on the screen, and we're working with pose 0. So again, I'm going to switch to my right hand view, and we'll take a look at where we are with this. What we need to do is simply bring all of these points up, and we need to make some adjustments with the M points. So let's start doing that. If we select all of these points and we just move them until we get this somewhere around here. And again, as I say, I'm working by eye here. I'm not too worried about getting things absolutely perfect. It doesn't really matter, because leaf springs, they're not, you know, they're not an exact science. I mean, there is a lot of science in the creation of them, obviously, but it's not going to be the case that this is going to go absolutely parallel and that everything is going to be, you know, mathematically perfect. It's not going to work like that. So we don't want to work like that either. Moving on from here, we can just make a little bit of an adjustment on the end arcs. We just bring those round just a bit there, and the same this end. Just bring those round to around that sort of much. Let's just change our view to Garrett lines, just see what we've got. And I would say that that's looking okay. Could possibly go a tad further there. leave that as it is. I think that's all right. So let's just change back to lines. In fact, I'm going to go to isopalms because that's an easier display to work with. Yeah, I mean, that's looking okay. What I might do actually is just bring the middle points up a little further. Let's just go back into our lines display, select our middle points, just bring those up a little further, and then do a little bit more adjustment here. So that we get it somewhere near flat, but not quite. Yeah, somewhere like that. I'm going to go with that. I think that's fine. Next thing to do is grab the endpoints here. Again, we'll move them higher. So they're just about touching there. And then once again, we can work with the tangents and adjust the shape until we get something that resembles the shape we want. I mean, you can play around with this to your heart's content. If you want to make it really 100% accurate, then by all means do. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just showing you the basic technique. It wants to be somewhere there. I'll get it as sort of accurate as I think is good enough. That should be okay. And then it's the same process with the other two splines. Just grab hold of these points, move them up until they're just about touching, and then make an adjustment here. That'll do nicely. And then our final spline. Bring these into position just about there. And a little bit of adjustment. It's only a tiny adjustment on this one. Something like that. And something like that. If we just take a look at that, and that's looking nice. Now, there's a little bit more that we need to do. What we're also going to do, if we select our right-hand view again, what I'm going to do is select all of these points, and I'm just going to move them very, very slightly. Just zoom in and so that I can see a bit closer. I'm just going to move them a very small amount, probably no more. If you can see what we've got the centimeters there. If I move them about that, 0.186, somewhere around 0.18 is fine. So 0.186 will do nicely. Let's do the same at this end. Again, we're going to go somewhere around 0.180. So just 174, that will be fine, I think. It doesn't have to be absolutely pedantic, just as long as they move enough. Because of course you've got to remember that when the spring moves up and it straightens out, it will have to go outwards. It will have to move outwards because the curve has got to, the actual, I suppose you could call it the slack. The slack has got to be taken up somewhere. So we've got to make that happen. Again, we should do the same with the others, but only tiny amounts. These can go less. So what we can do here is just move this one, say 150, somewhere there, 158, that will be okay. Same here, somewhere around 150. 158 was there, wasn't it? So, 145, whatever, that's fine. And this one, probably 120. 106 even, that'll do. As long as you're moving it a tiny bit, just to say, so that there's a difference. 104, that'll do. And this can be, I don't know, less than 100, say whatever it comes out to, 81, that'll do. And 81 there, or 90, whatever it comes out to. 93, that's fine. So we've made that tiny subtle adjustment. Now let's go into our pose morph tag here, and in our edit mode, we don't have to go into animate mode. We've got the strength here, and we can just see what this is doing. So we can see that that's working nicely. And we've got that subtle outward movement which is more obvious on the top layer. And that's fine. That's what I want to see. So that's excellent. The next thing then that we can think about doing is creating the brackets that would hold the leaf spring on the chassis of the potential vehicle. Obviously, we're not going to make the vehicle, we're just going to make the brackets. But in order to do that, we need to start with a couple of cylinders, and that's going to be the next stage for us. I'll just return this strength value to 0 so that we get our base pose, because I want to work with that. Go back into my right hand view and zoom out a little bit so that we're ready to see what we've got. I'll grab a hold of a cylinder. Now this needs to be 1.5 in the radius and 6.5 in the height. It wants a single height segment, and I'm going to give it 60 rotation segments. Just in my 3D view, I'll hit H to see what is going on. I just want to bring this downwards and then change to +X. Let's just zoom in a little bit and see what we've got. In the caps, I'll put a fillet on it, and I'll put 0.2 so that it matches up with everything else. Just pull it over here and drop it down. Go into my right hand view, and then we can start doing some work here and seeing what we've got. So let's have a look. So that should just about fit in there, I think. Just change my display to garage shading lines, and that looks as if it's quite nice. Let's have a look. Let's just make a few adjustments here and there. 3D view, and I mean that's working quite well. Now you've got to remember this cylinder is probably not going to really be seen anyway, because the bracket, or the side part of the bracket, is going to be covering most of it, so we don't have to be too worried about getting the radius absolutely within the leaf spring. Near enough is good enough. Next thing to do is hold down Command and drag another copy over here. Once again, I'll go into my right hand view, hit O for object, and we can see where we are. We can just bring that forward just a little bit, and that looks good. It's all looking fine. That's going to work. Yeah, that's going to work fine for us. Moving on from here then, what we can do is create 2 more cylinders. So I will drag this one up from here, select my first cylinder and drag this one. In fact, what I should do is get rid of this one. I'll select both cylinders and then Command drag, because that way I get both my new cylinders at the same height, which is what I want. Once again, I'll switch to my right hand view, and I need to move these 2 cylinders along their z-axes. Now at the moment this cylinder is minus 26.115. Let's make it minus 23, and that looks about right. We could possibly go minus 23.5, just a little bit closer, and this one will be 23.5, so that we get that sort of effect there. That should be quite nice for us, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think that will work. Okay, that's great. So the first cylinder here, and we've got, let's just align these correctly. If we'll just close the sweep for a minute, drop this down here. My second cylinder for there, which number is it? Is it number 3? Yes, it is. If I drop that there, I'm going to rename these. I'm going to call them right top and right bottom, and then these 2 we can drop beneath and say right, or rather left top and left bottom. So we know that which cylinders are which, and we can group these. So Option G and Option G. We can call these right and these left. Okay, that's fine. So we know that we've got our cylinders sorted out. The next thing that we need to do is bring in a rectangle again and build the side parts of our brackets. So that's the next port of call for us. Let's grab a hold of a rectangle, and I'm going to drop this into the left null here. Zero it out and start making some adjustments. Let's just zoom out a little bit, see where that is. Right, first thing I'm going to do actually is give it a target tag, and I'm going to get it to target the left top, and then we can work with its plane and change that, and that's fine. Now we've got it in the correct plane and everything is looking good. If we go into our right hand view, we can start to adjust the size. So we'll bring the width down for a start. That wants to be, we'll leave it at 10 for now. Let's just bring this down and see what we get here. Let's just bring that down to about 4. Okay, I would say it needs to go a little bit longer in the width here. So if we make that 10.4, possibly a little bit less, go 10.2. Yeah, now that looks good. It looks quite uniform to me. And if we switch on our rounding, we should find we get a reasonable result. Okay, we can go a little bit further, go 10.3. Yeah, now that's looking uniform. I like that. That's a good result. That's okay. And we can see, because we've got the target tag on it, it's absolutely aligned the way it needs to be aligned. So that's quite useful to do. Just put a target tag on something when you've dropped it into a group null, because that way you get it equidistant between the two center points of the cylinder objects, and then the target tag does the rest for you and makes it point in the correct direction. So we'll lose the target tag. The rectangle we can drop down here, and we can start thinking about what we're going to do with that next. So I'll switch back to my 3D view object, just get a bit closer, and we can move this over here, and that's about in the right place. Moving on from here, I'll hold down my Option key and select and extrude. Way too big and also going in the wrong direction. I'm going to make that minus, I'm going to say 0.5. Let's have a look, see where we are. So that's looking reasonably good. I mean, another thing we've got to do, of course, is bring in a couple of circles, and we're going to do that in a minute. Let's just make this the correct size though. Try 0.75. Might be too big. Yeah, a little bit too big. Minus 0.6. I would go with that actually. Minus 0.6 looks about right, because we can just bring that to there. And then it's just, I would say that's just about perfect. That's about where it needs to be. So we've got it that far. What we also need to do, we'll just switch off this extrude, and we know that we've got to bring in a couple of circles. So we'll bring those two in. Just Command drag to copy another one. And I'm going to group these now. The first circle I'm going to group into left top, the second into left bottom, and then select the pair of them by holding down my Command key and selecting, and then where we've got multiple, just 0 them. And they should now be in the correct positions if we go back into our right view. And they are. We can see we've got one here and one here. So that's great. So let's drag these beneath the rectangle, select all of them and hit C. And then finally connect objects and delete. Go into my side view, and we're now ready to do an extrude on these, I think. Let's have a look. So where's our extrude? Go into our object. Have we got a bit of an issue here? Let's have a look. Let's go back. Take this extrude away. Where are my circles? hang on, what have I got wrong? I've got a problem here. Let's have a look. Oh, my circles are way too big, of course they are. Okay, let's just do some work. Let's go back a few steps. These circles then, they're in the wrong plane for a start. They need to be there. And they need to be much, much smaller. So we'll make them the same size as our cylinders, which is 1.5. Now let's see what we've got. Object. And now they appear to be correct. Let's just go into our right-hand view. They should be correct now. So let's just align them with our rectangle. The rectangle is, let's have a look. Let's see these. Yeah, they just need to be zeroed out, don't they? So zero that out along the X, not on the Z. Leave the Z's alone. So zero that out. And now they're in the correct place and they're ready to be made editable and then connected and deleted. And then we should be able to switch this back on, and now we've got it correct. That's really nice. And with the extrude, we can go into our caps. Once again, in the bevels, we can say 0.2. In fact, we can go less. I think point. So go point. Try point. Let's have a look. Try point. It can be 0.1. I was thinking it could even be 0.05. Let's try 0.1. 0.5 will probably work actually. Let's go 0.05 so that it's a tiny little amount. Yeah, I would say that looks fine. Yep, that looks great. So that's the first half of our bracket made. We can command drag to create the second one, and we can just drag that over there and align it just by eye into place. And that looks good. That looks really nice. And then all we've got to do really to actually create the second one of these, we can group these into a null. What I'll do actually, before I do that, what I want to do is actually I'm going to bring a null into the scene. I'm going to drop it into LT for left top again. Go in here, zero it out. That gets it in the correct place, and then I can drop it down here. Not in there. Drop it down here and then put both extrudes into there. And now I've got that in the correct position. It's not 100% right, because what I need to do, in fact, I'll just take these out for a second. I'm going to give this a target tag. And I'm going to make it target left bottom this time. So now it's looking towards this, which is exactly where it will need to look at all times. And then we can group that into there. So now, because of course we've done some work with our spring and we know that it moves outwards, this has got to follow that, and this needs to make these side pieces actually look at the bottom cylinder here in order so that it follows it correctly. And of course the same thing is going to happen over here. So that's our first null, or our first, if we say bracket, and we call it just L bracket, that will be fine. That's good. So we've got those done. The next thing we can do is probably select that, and with this I'm just going to disable it for now, because I will want to move these over here. So what I'm going to do in order to do that, I'm just going to rename this actually. Call this right bracket. Spin it through 180 degrees, so zero that out. And then select my world axes and drag this into position over here. Go into my right hand view object and just make sure it's set up correctly, which is about there. That should be fine. And then with this I can make it target the right bottom. That's where I'm going to want to target. So let's have a look at right bracket. Let's just make sure I've got that correct. in my view there, and that's perfectly good. It's targeting that okay. And now we're there. We're actually doing what we should be doing. Let's just go over here and make sure I'm absolutely correct. Because this bit of it does need to be relatively precise. You want this to look good. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that looks okay. So we've got our two brackets in place, and they've got their target tags, and they're looking in the correct direction at the bottom cylinders, and they're going to follow those when we do some work to move them. And that's going to be our next port of call. Actually, there's one thing. Let's just select this and make sure that it's active. It's not, so we need to enable that. So we've got a bit of a problem. Now, why is that? Let's just check what these are called. I see what it is. So bottom bracket and top bracket are back to front. So we need to put this one down here and call it RB. And we need to rename this RT. We also need to go in here and make sure that this is targeting RB. And that's correct. Okay, fantastic, that's good. I'll also rename this actually Spring while I think about it, and open it up. Great, so we can move on from here and start working with our pose morph tag. So let's just switch to our right hand view, select our pose morph and make this 100 in the strength. And straight away we can see that the spring has moved, and we need to make this adjustment to our right bottom cylinder. I'll make the right brackets invisible in the editor so that they don't get in the way. Take a hold of this. Now, one thing we've got to do is make a note of these figures. So we know that the Z is 1.35, and similarly the left bottom will be minus 1.35. So make a note of these numbers, whatever yours happen to be. They may not be precisely the same as mine, but whatever they happen to be, make a note of them. Also make a note of the position Y, because we will actually need to move this upwards slightly, and then we're going to need to make some adjustments to the actual pose 0 in the pose morph. And we'll be doing that after we've done the work with the cylinders. Okay, so we can start to move our cylinder across, so we can pull this to somewhere about there. Just go into our 3D view, take a quick look. And yes, I think we're probably okay. Let's just hit O for object and just have a quick check. And yeah, I think that's working okay. Back to our right hand view, and we'll make the brackets visible. Yeah, and we can see, again, go back to our 3D view, and we can see it much more obviously there. We've got to make an adjustment in the height as well. So let's just do that now in the 3D view, and I think if we go to our right hand view and we select garage shading lines, let's have a quick look and see where we are. Yeah, I mean, that looks to me as if that's going to work okay there. That looks good to me. Yeah, that's fine. So now we've got some new figures, and those are going to be important because we're going to be using those in a range mapper. So we'll select, in fact we'll do it on the left, the actual left null here. We'll come down to Programming Tags, Expresso, and we've got the editor open and we're ready to start work. Actually, something's just occurred to me. I just need to close this for a second. Yeah, I just happened to see that this is not quite in the right place. What I need to do, I'm going to switch off both these target tags. Just disable them for a minute. Now, I'm going to remove these two from here and these two from here for a second, and then group the left and rights into the left and right bottom cylinders, and I'm going to zero them out. This is important. Oops, just zero that one out. And then I can put things back as they were. Just drop those into there. And that's fine. And that means now that the left and the rights are in exactly the same points as the bottom cylinders, and that's crucial because these bottom cylinders actually need to be zeroed out. Okay, so we know that we're sorted out there, and now we can bring back our target tags, and they should be correct, and they are. So everything is working as it needs to, and we can move this and it will follow. That's perfectly good, and the same with the left. Great, that's fine. So now we can open up our Expresso editor once again and start work. The first thing we need to do is bring in the pose morph, and in our tag properties we can say pose.0strength, because that's what we're going to be driving everything by. Okay, or driving everything with, I suppose I should say. The next thing to do is bring in two range mappers. So we'll do that, come down to calculate, range mapper, bring the first one in, and then command drag to create the second. Now I'm going to just rename these a little bit because I don't want to get confused. So I'm going to call this range mapper Y and this range mapper Z, and we'll move on from here. The pose morph strength will be a 0 or a number between 0 and 1, so that will be fine to plumb straight into our range mapper's inputs, because of course we will want them to have an input and upper, or an input lower and an input upper of between 0 and 1, so that's perfectly good. Now the Z is going to be applied to both bottom cylinders. So the left one is obviously going to move in a negative direction. So a negate node is going to be useful to us here. So we'll bring in a negate so that anything that is plumbed into there becomes a negative value. So that's perfectly set up. And then the next thing to do is bring in both the LB and RB cylinders, and we can set them up with position Y and position Z ports at the input stage. Get that done. Great, so that's all set up. So this is as much as we need for our first Expresso expression, but we need to work out the actual positions, or the final positions, for our cylinders. So if we switch to our, no, I don't want those, switch to our right hand view, what I'll do is remove the right brackets from the viewport, just switch those off for now, and the same with the left brackets, we'll just get rid of them so they're not in the way. Select our right bottom cylinder, and we can start to play around and see where we're going with this. In fact, what we'll do, go into the pose morph, and we'll bring the strength up to 100% so that we can see what we're up against here. So we know that our position initially for the right bracket is 0 in the Z. So if we move this over here until we're just about in the right position, let's just check this in the 3D view. Just say object so that we can have a bit of a closer look. Just move that out of the way a second. And yeah, that's all looking good to me. I don't think there's a problem there. So we'll go back into the right hand view. So we can see that that's moved by just 0.176. So in our range mapper Z here, we can say 0.176 for the upper output, or the output upper. And that should be fine, and that should work fine for both of these. So we can plumb those in. In fact, they're the wrong way round. I need to plumb that one in there and that one in there. And what I'll do is just, oops, not that one. That one needs to plumb in there. That's better. And then we can swap these over. Just bring them down. That's great. So that's all set up, and that's working. And if we check the left one, if we just select LB and object, we should be fine that the left cylinder is pretty much in the correct place too. And that looks good. That's looking as if that's going to work out fine for us. And then all it is the Y values. Now, what we can do in order to check the Y values, we haven't moved those yet. We'll bring in the left bracket and we'll bring in the right bracket. Go into our 3D view and we can see that we definitely got to move upwards. So what we'll do is move our right cylinder upwards and we'll check this in the right hand view. Go to Gareth Shade Lines Object and we'll just see where this is. Just move it up a little bit and maybe down a little bit just to double check where it is. That looks to me to be in the correct position. So we've moved 0.92 in the Y, so we can put a value in here of 0.92 and that can just simply be plumbed into both of these. Now let's just make sure that this is correct. And that's a bit strange, I don't know quite what's happened there, but that should be correct. Just go back again. Why is that wrong? Let's just make that, hang on, let's just make that 0. Just zero that out for me. Just put that in there again. Don't do that. Put that in there again and 0 that out. 0. That's interesting. Let's just move. Well, let's hang on a minute. That's very strange. Let's see what's going on here a minute. Let's just take those away. And if I move that up, surely that's going to be right. That can't not be right. Oh, sorry, it's 0.092. Aha, that's why it's wrong. Okay, great. So let's just plumb that into there, and in the range mapper we can say 0.092. Aha, got it perfectly. Okay, that's great. So that's working, and that they will both be working exactly the same. Let's just have a quick look, see where we are. Make sure that we're there, and we can see that yes, that's working nicely. So let's have a go with the pose morph. If we bring that down now, we should find that they're following, and they're doing exactly what they need to do. Yep, all working really nicely. So that's our first Expresso expression complete. There will be another one a little bit later on, but that's all we need to do for now. I said earlier that we would need to make an adjustment to the points of our pose morphs, pose 0. And that's what we need to do next. So let's just go into our right hand view once again. I'll remove the brackets, or rather the right brackets. I should just remove those because I only need to work here. Now you can see that we've got to raise this. So the spring, if we go back into lines, we can select these points around this edge and move them upwards until they align correctly, which is going to be somewhere around there. We've also got to do the same on the left side. So what we'll do is just say, well, in fact, I'll just zoom out, just go over to here. And again, I'm going to do this by eye. I'm not too worried about being absolutely precise. Let's just move that one up. Where are we? Somewhere. So that's the edge that I need to line up with, say there. That should be fine. That should be fine. And now that should follow. Let's just go into our pose morph and see what we get. And yeah, that's following. You can see that it's following it, and it's looking good. That's exactly what would happen in real life. So yeah, I'm happy with that, and that's going to look nice. That's going to look really good when that's all in place. Let's just get that back in place, and yeah, we can see that that's going to work. Brilliant. So that's the last little part of that done. We don't need to do really anything else, I don't think. That should be fine. I think everything else will follow along okay. I don't think there's any need to adjust the layers beneath that. Yeah, I think that's okay. Right, good. So we've got that sorted out and it's all working nicely. Moving on from here then, the next stage of this is to start working with dynamics. While I think about it, I'm going to select all and drop everything into a null and call this leaf spring. That's good, so that's all ready. The next thing to do is to bring in a cube, and I'm going to drop the cube. Where am I going to drop it? Well, in fact, I'll drop it into leaf spring, and then I'll position it. That can be positioned. So look, I'll just go into my right hand view again, hit H. It's a massive cube at the moment. It needs to be worked with, so we need to make this cube much smaller. We'll make it about, let's go, just thinking about where we are. We want to be maybe 8 by say 5 by about 6, and then let's drop this into position just beneath the spring, hit O for object so that we can see where we are, and just drop it somewhere there. I'll make some adjustments to these sizes in the minute. It's just an initial setup. I will fillet it, but I'll make it 0.2 so that it's consistent with everything else. Okay, let's have a look, see where we are. So it's not bad in terms of its size and shape. It's a little bit deeper than it needs to be. We could probably go 3. Yeah, 3 will probably be okay for the depth of that. And I might go a little bit wider in the X, make it 9. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I've got a cube in there. I'll just do a quick adjustment in here just to make it in the correct place, which is going to be about there. Great, so that's all looking good so far. The next thing I can do is actually make a copy of this and place it above the top layer of our spring object and just adjust that into position there. That's fine. I mean, this would be a bracket that would literally bracket the wheels of the vehicle to the suspension system here. What we've also got to do, and I'm not being in any way sort of particular with the modelling, I'm just going to bring in a cylinder here. I'm going to make it much smaller, something like 1 in the radius and probably about, I don't know, 15 or something in the height for now. Give it one height segment and make it where it can be 60 or in the rotation segments. And then I'll drop that into my cube here and zero it out. So it's in the correct position nearly, and then we can do some work. So what have we got here? So we've got this cube. Where's my other cube gone actually? There should be another cube. Ah, it's down the bottom. Let's just drop that in there. Now what I'm going to do here is make some adjustments, so probably 0.5 will do for the radius. It's a little bit too big, so it wants to be maybe 12. Let's just move that. Oh, hang on, don't want to do that. Just want to move it up. No, I just want to move it up in the Y. That's fine. Could be about right. I think that's not too far off. I mean, as I say, modelling here, I'm not really going to do anything. This is just illustrative more than anything. If I just move this into position somewhere around there, and then all I can do is command drag to copy, drop that somewhere around there, select both of them, and then in my top view once again I can command drag to copy these over here, and again by eye I'm just going to drop them in somewhere around there, and that's done. So we've got our top and bottom cubes. Now this bottom cube here, this original cube, what I'll do in fact is take these out of here and drop them into the cube here. This cube I'm going to make a copy of, drop it here, and this is going to be a dynamic cube, so I'm going to call it D cube. It won't be visible ultimately, we're going to make it invisible, but for now we'll leave it in. I'm also going to create the wheel now, so I'll grab another cylinder and I will drop that cylinder. Let's have a look, where am I? Let's just go back a step there. If I grab another cylinder and drop this cylinder in here, I'm going to rename it wheel. I will drop it into, I'll drop it into the D cube actually, just drop it into there and zero it out. Let's have a look and see where we are. Obviously it's enormous at the moment and it doesn't need to be that big. It's also in the wrong plane because it needs to be in plus X. We can make it maybe 10 in the diameter. I may make it a little bit less than that. And in the height, probably, let's go 5 for what it is. We'll do some adjustment in a minute. Hit O for object and let's see where we are. Well, it doesn't look too bad in terms of its size. Yeah, I mean, it kind of works, but let's just make it a little bit smaller. Let's make it 9. And yeah, I mean, I'll go with that, I think, and perhaps a little bit wider, make it 6. That looks all right. I think the dimensions of that are pretty good. 1 height segment and 60 rotation segments once again. And then what we'll do is just go to Garrett lines as well, just to make this more visible, and also isopalms. That's nice. And then we can, in our caps, fillet this. I don't want it that big, but probably 1 will be fine for that. And that's good. It's looking like a wheel. We can then separate it from the dynamic cube. So we've got our basic setup for what we need to actually create the rig that's going to join this all together. The next thing we need to worry about is making certain things dynamic, so that will be our next step. Before we start doing that work, we do need to do something here. We need to go back to our base pose, and then we need to adjust everything around it accordingly. So we need to grab a hold of all of the elements that we've just dropped in, and we need to move these down. Let's go to our right hand view, and we'll do a double check to make sure that we've got everything aligned as it needs to be, which is about there. That should be fine there. Yep, that'll all work. I think that's okay. Great. So that's our first pose ready to go, and everything is set up as it needs to be. Moving on from here, then we can bring in some dynamics. Now, the first thing we need to do is bring in a dynamic connector. So we'll come into Simulate Dynamics Connector, bring this in, and we'll drop it between the D cube and the wheel. And we know that we need to set this up as a wheel suspension. That's what we've got to set it up as. Now, in our display, it's a little bit too big. Let's make this about 10. What I need to do first is group it into my wheel and zero it out. So let's just get that done. So that's zeroed out. At the moment, it's not orientated correctly. It needs to be orientated so that the Z-axis is facing in the direction of the wheel, so that it will spin. The wheel will actually rotate around the Z-axis. So try minus 90, and that's fine. And now it's aligned correctly. The next thing to do within the connector is to start working with the lower limit Y and the upper limit Y. The lower limit Y can be 0 because I don't want it to go downwards. I only want it to move upwards, and I'm going to set my upper limit to 3. That's as high as I'm going to allow that to move, and even that is probably slightly too high, but that's fine. We've given it an upper limit of 3. Now everything else in here we can leave the same. We don't need to worry about anything else. It works fine. So what we'll do next then is remove the connector from the wheel, drop our D cube in as object A and our wheel as object B, and that set things up. But of course both these objects need to be made dynamic, and that will be the next step. The D cube, if we give it a rigging, rather a simulation tag, and we say a rigid body, we need to simply set it to a static mesh, and that's as much as we need to do with that. The wheel, again, we can give it a rigid body tag, but this one we can leave exactly as it is. And if we run the timeline, we find that it stays there because the connector is of course holding all of this together, so nothing is going to drop. That's the first part of this that we need to do, and that's as much as we need to do to make this rig actually work. But in order to see this in action, we need to put it on the ground, and we need to move the ground beneath the wheel. That's how I'm going to do this. I'm not going to move the rig, I'm going to move the ground beneath the wheel. You can do it the other way, but we'll just move the ground. So I'll get myself a flat plane. I'm just going to hit H so that I can see everything. Drop this down here, go into my right hand view. So I'm going to say front view, then right hand view, and I'm just going to drop this somewhere beneath the wheel, just there. Adjust the plane so that it's a little bit smaller. I think we'll go down to about 250, and we'll adjust the width so that it's just beyond the actual rig. The segments, let's have a look. What do we think we need? Let's just go into wireframe so that I can see the segments more easily. The width segments, I think, well, they can be 1 really, they're not important, but the height segments I'm going to make 20 so that we've got a few more to work with, and I'm going to make this editable, so hit C, and then we can start working with the plane. Now the plane, of course, has got to be made dynamic too, so this needs to be a collider. So if we say simulation and we say collider body, that will be fine. What we'll then do is start working with the plane some more. So what we'll do is just zoom in and make some adjustments. I'm also going to move it, of course, over here so that we start from pretty much the end of the plane. Just move it somewhere there. And select edge mode and start work. So I'm going to bring this up to around here. I said that I'd allow a maximum of 3 for the actual motion, and I've moved that just over 2. Same with this one, I'll just move this a little bit too. In fact, I'll go into world view or world coordinates, just move that up to there. Move this one up. Move this a little bit. I mean, you can do this however you wish to. It's not a problem. It's just to create a little bit of a bumpy road. That's all we're trying to do here, so that we could see the suspension actually moving. Let's just move that a little bit up there, and then that can go higher. That can go sort of there, and that one, say there. And that should give us a result that works, I think, so that's okay. The only other thing I might do is drop that, hold down Option key and drop it into a subdivision surface, and then do a little bit of work with that. If we change this to Catmull Clark Open Subdivision. In fact, just go to edge and corner so that we do that. That should be fine, and that gives us something that I hope will work. And we can give this a go. So what we'll do is, with our subdivision selected, come into coordinates, and we know we're going to move this along the z-axis. So we'll record at that point. I'm also going to allow myself 180 frames, so that we've got a bit more to work with. Let's just move that back to there, because I want that at frame 0, and then just, well, we can hit that and go to the end. And then with the subdivision surface selected again, I can just bring this through until it gets to here. That should be perfectly good for us. And then record its position Z once more. Go back to the beginning. We can see that the suspension is starting to work. Let's have a quick look and see what we've got. So go back into isopalms to give us a better display. Let's just zoom in on the suspension here. Hit play and see if we get anything good. Right, we're definitely getting the wheel moving. That's fine. That's doing what it should be doing. So we need a final Expresso expression to make this all hang together. Before we do that though, I'm just going to remove everything from the leaf spring null, because I need to drop this leaf spring null into here, into the wheel, and zero it out. Remove it once again and put everything back into it. And that means now that my wheel is working from a 0 position, which is what I need. So I just need another expression. So I'll get another Expresso tag and we'll put it on the wheel. Drag the wheel in and get its position Y at the output stage. Okay, that's great. And then I can pass this to my cube here. Now I've got to think about this because I think I need to group, I need to just group this top cube or into there, and I just need to bring this back, and I need to bring all of this back. The dynamic cube I can make invisible, completely invisible. So all of this is now one rig. Now let's have a look, see where we are now. Let's have a quick look here. I think what we need to do now, in actual fact, is do some rearranging. We will drop all of that into there, and now I'm going to pass my wheel's height to that because they're at the same height. So my wheel, my wheel is exactly the same height as this bottom cube. So I'll drag this cube in and give it a position Y input stage there, and I can put these two together. Let's see if that does anything. And straight away we can see that that's doing what it needs to be doing. Okay, that's good. So now what we can think about doing is doing some work with a range mapper. Right, before we finish this off, I'm just going to close the window for a minute. Now, off camera, this plane, I've adjusted some of the edges. I've just lowered them down a little bit because they were looking a little bit too high. So that adjustment has been made, and if yours are looking too high, just make sure you pull them down a bit because you don't want the spring going too high. And that's what we're going to be ultimately working on next. We're going to be moving things around here by using a range mapper. So that's been done. Another thing I'm going to do is a little bit of reordering in the object list here. So I'm going to move these two so that they're between the two Expresso expressions, and the spring I'm going to move down to the bottom. That's the order I want things to run in. Okay, so we can now open the Expresso editor again, and we can bring in a range mapper. Bring one of those in. Plumb in the position Y from the wheel. And then we can start to look at what we're going to do here. So this wheel we'll select and then start moving the timeline and see where we think its maximum height is going to be. So it's getting a little bit higher. So that's 1499 there. Let's see if there's a greater height down here. No, not there, so that's all right. See what we've got here. 1.633, 1.744. We could probably say then, let's go into our range mapper here and say 1.744. That will probably be our maximum height. And then we can bring in the pose morph tag again. And once again, in our tag properties, we'll say pose 0 strength, and we can plumb this into here. And straight away, you can see that the suspension system has jumped into the correct position. So let's go back to the beginning of our animation, and you can see that everything is matching up. So the running order is good in here. There's no lag. So let's just run this and see what we get. Yeah, and it all looks really nice, doesn't it? That looks beautiful. Let's just go into our right-hand view. Yeah, and everything is running beautifully. That's all synchronizing perfectly. You can see that the brackets are jiggling about as they would in reality. So yeah, everything is working really nicely. Yeah, spot on. And that sorts that out, and that's how you do it. That's how you make all this work. So there you go. That's how you make a leaf spring suspension rig, and it's been done using a combination of Expresso, Dynamics, a dynamic connector, a couple of target tags, and a pose morph tag. And it's been quite simple to do, but it's been a bit of a marathon, this tutorial, because of the number of steps there have been involved in the making of this. But as always, I really hope that you've got a lot out of this video and that you've enjoyed watching it and that it's been worthwhile. And if you have, then please like the video and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And of course, leave a comment and ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, then please share the video, because all this good stuff helps to keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about completes this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.